From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the Library of Congress. My name is Angel Batiste, and I'm the area specialist for Anglophone West Africa. Marita Harper, who actually coordinated today's program, cannot be with us due to an emergency. But again, on behalf of my colleagues in the African section and in the overall division, it is a true pleasure, a great pleasure, to welcome you to the African and Middle Eastern Division Reading Room. Formally established in 1960, a momentous year as 17 nations in Africa gained independence, the African section plays a vital role in facilitating the library's acquisition, preservation, and bibliographic control of materials from and about the 54 countries of sub-Saharan Africa. Meeting the needs of the U.S. Congress, other government agencies, universities, and the general public, the African section is recognized as a major world resource center, focusing on virtually all topics relating to the African nation-states. For both historical as well as contemporary research studies, the library's Africana holdings include manuscripts, maps, microfilm, monographs, newspapers, periodicals, official government publications, films, and video and sound recordings. This is increasingly being augmented by a growing body of digital materials. In its efforts to make the library's vast and valuable Africana collections better known, outreach activities are an important and ongoing part of the African section agenda. In 2011, the section launched a new literary series, Conversations with African Poets and Writers, which brings accomplished African literary artists to the library for public readings and discussions. The series is jointly sponsored in partnership with the library's Poetry and Literature Center and the Africa Society of the National Summit on Africa. Today, we introduce our second fall series, hosting Ivorian writer and playwright, Dr. Amadou Koné. Before I ask Patricia Baines of the Africa Society to the podium, I'd like to just take a moment to pay tribute to the life and work of Ghanaian poet, teacher, and diplomat, Professor Kofi Awunor, who was killed in the recent Kenya terrorist attack. At this point, I turn the podium over to Patricia Baines from the Africa Society.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you to Dr. Angel Batiste and Dr. Robert Casper. The Africa Society of the National Summit on Africa is pleased to partner on this series with the Middle Eastern Division and the Poetry and Literature Center of the Library of Congress. This program is a wonderful resource in educating Americans and people throughout the world about the poets and writers living on the continent, and as well as highlighting the contributions of those that are in the African diaspora. The mission of the Africa Society is to educate Americans about the countries, the economies, the contributions emanating from the continent of Africa. We tell a different story. We seek to start a different conversation on Africa that changes perceptions and creates partnerships. Dr. Amadou Touré's work is impressively expansive. It extends from the oral literatures of Africa to modern written literature. I commend you personally for your focus on the oral literature of Africa that is such a rich treasure and a foundation for the pieces of literary culture on the continent. You're a tribute to Africa's literary past, and I believe an inspiration to the younger generations of writers. We appreciate your participation in this program today, and also to those who will be watching this later online. Thank you. I turn the podium right now to Dr. Kasper. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia, and thank you to Angel. And thanks to all of you for coming out today for this wonderful event and for the launch of our third season of Conversations with African Poets and Writers. My name is Rob Kasper. I'm the head of the Poetry and Literature Center here at the library. The center is home to the Poet Laureate Consultant in Poetry and has been for 75 years. We also put on programs like this, as well as readings, lectures, and panels throughout the year. If you want to find more out about our programs, you can visit our website, www.loc.gov/poetry. You can also check out events sponsored by the African and Middle Eastern Division on its website, and check out webcasts of previous Conversations with African Poets and Writers events at www.loc.gov/rr/AMED/. Also, I should say, if you don't mind, could you turn off any cell phones or electronic devices at this time that might interfere with the recording of this broadcast? And there will be a short question and answer period at the end of the event. And if you do participate in that question and answer period, you give us permission to allow to use your participation in future webcasts or broadcasts. Today I'm honored to introduce our featured writer, Amadou Koné. Amadou Koné was born in Burkina Faso in 1953 and raised in Côte d'Ivoire. He received a PhD in comparative literature at the University of Tours and a D.Lit at the University of Limoges. In 1997, he joined the Georgetown University faculty, where he is a professor of French. Before coming to Georgetown, he taught French at Tulane University. He also taught literature at the Université Nationale de Côte d'Ivoire, Abidjan, in the Department of Modern Languages. Dr. Koné has produced a total of 6 novels, 4 plays, and a collection of short stories, as well as 2 studies on African oral literature and the novel. He has also co-published an anthology of literature from Côte d'Ivoire and has edited a collection of essays on African literature and cinema. His honors include the grand prize at the Inter-African Theatrical Competition for his 1976 play Les Canards sont vides, and the Best African Novel Award from the Leopold Sédar Senghor Foundation in 1985. Koné was the 1981 Fellow of the Pro Helvetia Foundation in Zurich, Switzerland, and from 1990 to 1992, he was a Fellow of the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation in Bonn, Germany. Let me tell you a little bit about today's program before we begin. It will go as follows. Dr. Koné will read, and then we'll follow with a moderated discussion led by Angel Baptiste, who gave the welcome earlier. Finally, we will open up the floor to your questions, and we have these wireless mics. We'll pass them around. In fact, I will do the honors, and we ask that during the Q&A session you wait until you have a mic to ask your question so we can make sure you're part of our recording. Now, please join me in welcoming Amadou Koné.
Thank you very much for being here with us. I hope you will be generous with me. I am tired because I'm just coming back from my country 2 days ago, and I was very happy to be back home. And I am happy to be with you to read a little bit and to talk about African literature. I have chosen an excerpt of a play I have written in 2006. And actually this play has been performed at Georgetown University in the Gonda Theater. So I'm going to read this short excerpt, and if you want, I can comment it or in the discussion part. We are in the palace with two persons, a prince who is waiting for a coronation and his wife. And these two persons are coming from Paris. They are African, but they were living in France. And they are waiting so the prince can be coronated, can become the ruler of this African country. And it is a fictitious country, of course. Dauphine's wife. Will they never stop? Dauphine. They will stop. Of course, they will stop. Dauphine's wife. How can they keep making such a racket? How can they wiggle their bodies like that? Dauphine. This music is not just racket for someone who understands our culture. This music is harmonious and full of meaning. The steps and movement have a deep meaning. As for the dancers, they are not, as you put it, wiggling. They are dancing. This word has a great significance around here, especially in the current situation. Dauphine's wife. I am afraid I am going to lose my mind because I don't understand this culture at all. Yes, I think I am going to go crazy. Dauphine. Patience, 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 my dear. Dauphine's wife. I would just like a few moments of peace and quiet, but there is nowhere for me to go. There is no place to escape this thunderous din. Dauphine. There, my dear. The situation is not as bad as you make it out to be. You must understand. The whole country is celebrating my uncle's funeral. He led this nation for a long time. He is a great man. In this country, the length of the funeral, the intensity of the noise, and the extravagancy of the festivities all celebrate the greatness of the person who died. Dauphine's wife. Your uncle was a great man, no doubt, but I think that the priority now, 6 months after his death, should be to take care of the political, economic, and social issues facing this country. I am educated and I have a logical mind. For me, things are clear. Your uncle died after a reign of several decades, something which is hard to imagine. The delegation of the country's notables came to Paris to see you. They proposed that you come back to your country. They said, according to the custom, you inherit the political power. We abruptly left everything behind, and now, here we are. So, I thought that they would quickly proceed with the inauguration so you could start serving this country to put it back to work. In my mind, it all seems so simple. Dauphine. Theoretically speaking, it's the way things ought to be done. Dauphine's wife. What do you mean, theoretically speaking? Practically speaking, it's the way that things must be done. What civilized country would let the leadership position remain vacant for even 1 single hour? Dauphine. The problem with you and the people who educate you is that you do not understand that civilization is a relative concept. Every country has its own culture. These cultures don't always function the way that you think they should. That doesn't mean some are uncivilized and others civilized. I agree with this philosopher who said, "It is the savage who believes in savagery." Duffy's wife. All right, so I am the savage here, but I have the right to be tired of this barbaric civilization. So this is the beginning of this play. And to summarize quickly the play, the inauguration can't take place because there is something the notables of the tribe can't find. They need to find something. And without that, the inauguration can't take place. And this something, nobody knows really what it is. They don't know if it is. They call it Sigila. And Sigila is a siege, a place to be sit in. But this thing has disappeared, and nobody is really able to find it. And during the whole play, the problem will be to define what is Sigila, how they can find Sigila, how they can bring it back, so they can really solve this problem of inauguration. And at the end, we will understand that Sigila is not just a chair, it's all the knowledge of the tribe, the kingdom, the laws, the religion, the social understanding of the tribe, all these things. And the country can't really function because we have lost all these things. And there is just one person who can help. It is the blind old man. He is blind, but he's the only one who can really see and bring all this knowledge to save the country. Because the country began to fall apart. You know, some tribes said, well, we don't belong to this thing anymore, and there is some secession and all that. But thanks to the old man, the blind old man, the country is going back to its original culture, and the inauguration can take place, and everything is fine at the end. So this is Sigila, Sigia, as the title is said. Sigi, this is a Bambara word, very difficult to translate in English. It is impossible. Sigi is the verb to sit, Sigi. Sigia is the fact that people are sit, Sigila. How they can be sit together, actually how they can live together. So it is more than just sitting, it is life together. And Sigia is really the whole thing. And really that is the problem with African literature, and maybe we are going to talk about it. It is very difficult to translate the imaginary, the African imagery in a language like French or English, as it will be difficult to translate really some word from French to Bambara or Baoulé or Senufo or other African languages. So we are just trying what is written in French or English is just not what should be written if it was written in the African language, I believe. Thank you.
Before I begin my questions, I'd like to thank Dr. Koné for the gift donation. We now have a copy of the play in our Africana collections, as well as other important works by Dr. Koné. So we thank you very much for that important gift collection. I have several questions here, and each question probably consists of 5 or 6 questions in one. First of all, when did you actually start writing creatively? And how have you balanced out writing stories and plays?
Well, I sat early. Actually, the first thing I have written was a play, and that was in high school, because we used to have a celebration at the end of the school year, and we have to perform a play. And that year we didn't have a play, and I told my classmate that I will try to write something, because we were studying the théâtre classique français, you know, Molière, Racine, and all these people. And there was a situation we have studied in history which was very theatrical, I thought. It was the story of one of our great monarch in African history, Samori, who was a Malinke conqueror, and he fought against the French for 18 years. And Samori was really our Napoleon, you know, the Napoleon of Africa. But there was one thing. His son, at one point, was admiring the French and was telling his dad, oh, we can't beat them. They are too strong for us and all that. And of course, Samori didn't like that. And what he did, according to history, was that he killed his son, because that was not a good influence for his army. And that situation seems very interesting for me, for a play, because it was really the conflit cornélien, as they said in French literature. It was the devoir against the feelings, you know, les sentiments, you know, the love for his son and his duty to fight, you know, what was important for the whole Africa. So I wrote this play very quickly. It was a short thing, and we performed it, and I believe it was successful. And so it was fun to do it, and writing, and I wrote some novels too. And actually, one of my most successful novels, Studies Everywhere, Read Everywhere in Africa, Emerald of Africa, that African was written in high school. And actually, after I said my because these are ways to do things. To write, for me at least, I don't know, for some people can conciliate these two things very easily, but for me it's more difficult because teaching is other thing, and as soon as I begin to write creative writing now, I see structures, and
In your play, Segalia, you address the issues of the condition of African intellectuals and the political and mental state of 21st century Africa. How do you feel playwriting is uniquely equipped to address such issues?
well, I think it is the problem of the whole literature, really, not just the playwriting, novels, poetry, and everything. You have to believe that literature has a power, can help solve the problem we are dealing with, social, or political, economical problems. You have to believe in that. I am not completely naive, thinking that literature can solve everything. But I believe that literature is really important because it an artistic way to talk about serious things. And when you are writing, you hope that people will enjoy what you are writing, and at the same time, they will reflect, they will think about the situation. Personally, I don't have solution when I am writing. What interests me is to say, we have some important problem here, and here are these problems. How they can become very complicated, and everybody can try to bring a solution. So there are essays, for the intellectual. If I want to say something, to give a solution and all that, I will write an essay, or a pamphlet or something like that. So I will say what I think clearly, that literature is the place to propose a piece of art.
Thank you. Can you speak for a few minutes about the contemporary literature creations emerging both in continental Africa as well as in the African diaspora? And how do you think your work fits into both or either?
Well, Africa is a continent. And we used to talk about African literature like the literature of a little country. Everybody thought that he can just say, okay, that's what African literature is. And he just the linear history of that literature. It is complicated, First, it will be difficult for me to talk about African literature in general. I am specialist of Francophone African literature. And even Francophone, I know more about West African literature than maybe Central African literature. Although I try to read what I can read, sometimes Anglophone literature, Kofi Awinor, you just talk about. Of course, I have read his books, and some others from South Africa or East Africa. But maybe the trend now for African writers is that they are going opposite way of seeing Africa, the origin, like an ideal place. The origin are not anymore very positive place, you know. The young writers, most of the young writers, seems to say the world is open and we take what is positive in the foreign countries, for example. I think that characterizes the writers who are now in Paris, the young writers in Paris. That's a way to see things. And in my view, sometimes there is an exaggeration even in this movement, because they begin saying that finally identity is where I am. They don't care about African identity. Some said, for instance, my identity is that I am Francophone. What that means, I don't know. So you are Francophone, not Malian, not Congolese, not Ivoirian, but Francophone. So who are the French? Are they Francophone or French? So I don't know. So it is a trend that is, you can understand why they want this freedom, you know, to do what they want. That is different from the old story, the old history where Africa was everything. But I wouldn't go that far as they are going.
Dr. Koné, in your bio, it states that you're particularly interested in the oral literary genre of Africa and its influence on the modern novel. Can you expand upon this a bit, both in terms of your work and in the work of other African writers?
Yes, I have been interested by this problem for a very long time, because the criticism of African literature for a long time have followed what the French scholar in our case were saying. And they were saying about African literature most of the time, for instance, the novel is not a good novel. The characters are not round enough. There is no complexity. The story is very simple, you know. And there were this criticism all the time. And when I began writing my thesis, what they call at that time troisième cycle, I was interested in showing that most of African novel, to understand most of African novel, you need to know traditional literature, oral literature, to be able really to judge and to say if an African novel is good or not good, if the characters are built in a satisfactory manner. You have to know what the character is in the oral literature. And so I tried to build a bridge between this modern literature, African literature, and the oral literature. And through some paradigm, you can see that those who are saying, oh, the characters are not good, they are flat and all that, they don't know what they are talking about, because you have to know how to read these characters, you know. And if you know that, you can see how complex they are. And literature is about tradition, you know, everywhere. And so you have to remember that even if we are writing in English or French, our tradition is, if you are educated in African culture, our tradition comes from this oral literature. So that is what I am doing.
Thank you. Can you outline for us what are the dominant themes that one finds in today's African literature? What are African writers?
I think identity is important. You know, we went through African culture, the images of, the very positive images of Africa from the Negritude time. That was kind of mystification too. And the time of the dictators, you know, we have had a lot of literature about dictators and tyrants and all these people. And now I believe one important thing is the identity. And I think those who are interested in identity mostly are the people from the diaspora, those living abroad. Because at one point they don't know really if they are losing their identity, if they are right to say, oh, well, I don't care about my traditional identity and all that. So that is important. But we still have the traditional themes of politics, social problem, you know, the everyday stuff.
My final question, what do you think is the future for the African writer? And more importantly, what steps need to be taken to bring attention and recognition from the international community to African literary scholarship?
I believe that what is done here in the United States is very good. African literature is taught in American universities more than in France, for instance, more than the colonial, the former colonial powers. You know, so that is very good. Everywhere you have, if you don't have a department you have a department of African studies, but in the Francophone area, in the French department, you have a scholar or two teaching African literature. So that is really very, very good thing. So in scholarship, we don't have really a problem. But the problem maybe is the recognition of the public at large. Because we have some very good writers who has been translated here, and nobody knows them. I was in Ivory Coast 3 days ago, and we were talking about Amadou Koné. Amadou Koné is, in my view, one of the best African novelists. He is really one of the best. I don't say best African writer, but best writer in the world. And he has been translated here, and nobody knows him. Maybe because of the way he has been translated, the publishing houses where he has been published by University Press. And maybe he didn't have a good agent. But I thought if things have been done well, he would have been known. He deserved to be known as people popular here. You know. Yes. And maybe that is a problem. And in Francophone Africa, we don't know the system. And that is where we need to make some effort. So very good author writers can be published and be known.
Okay. Dr. Koné, we thank you.
Thank you very much.
At this point, we will open up for questions. And again, once you, or if you ask a question, you are also granting permission to be webcast.
Thank you very much. My question to Dr. Koné is, when you discussed that the colonial languages, English and French, don't really capture the essence of African society or African culture, but to publish them or to make the works available in indigenous languages would exclude a large portion of the readership. What would you propose to balance the two?
This problem is very big, and of course I can't solve it just to sit here, because we are talking about that for a very long time, during the colonization, after the colonization, and even now. My view is that it was important to write in our languages. And it is important maybe to try to do it even now. But the situation of the former French colony is that the African language were not written. In the English colonies, they used to write their languages, so it was easy. But even now, today, in countries like Côte d'Ivoire, we don't teach our languages at school. So it is very difficult to do. If we could do it, I believe that it will be very important, because we could express ourselves as we do in these languages. And I believe that we could write great books, you know. I can write French because I have studied French for a long time. A lot of people in my country can write French. That is not a problem. But writing a literary book is not the same thing as writing an essay or a political discourse. For the creative writing, you are translating an imaginary. You are translating something built in a culture. And this thing has been built by the traditional language. And if you say it in French, of course you can say it, but it is not the same thing, you know. It is really a problem. I don't know if you read, for instance, Nkrumah, the writer I was talking about some time ago. Nkrumah is trying to translate the Malinké, his language, into French. And he is succeeding at one point. But that is just, that is a solution, not a definitive solution. But you can see when you read Nkrumah how the Malinké really speak, what they think really. And at some point he can't really express himself as he wants to express himself. But now, your question is, if we were able to write in these languages, how about the people who read them? I think we can see that there are some very small languages where people are producing their literature. I don't know, the Korean, they are writing in Korean. I don't know how big the population of Korea is. But I know the Pula, for instance, they are a very big ethnic group. The Bambara, for instance, you have the Bambara everywhere in West Africa, Mali, Cote d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso, and all that. So a book written in Bambara will be read in all these places. And there is the translation. There is the possibility to translate this book in French for the other people or in English. But at the beginning, it will be a book written in the African language. And I think it will make a difference. I don't know if I am right, but that is what I think.
Do you find that when you're writing fiction, if you're writing fiction here, and then you have one style, but when you're going back and you're in Côte d'Ivoire and you're writing, is your fiction different?
Yeah, since I have been here, I wrote just one thing, Sigi. And I couldn't write because writing for me is really a matter of sincerity, if I can say. You know, I write things I believe in. I talk about problem I know. And I talk about what is important to me. And since I have been here, I try to write, but I was far from Côte d'Ivoire. And a lot of bad things were happening there. And I couldn't just sit here in Washington and begin writing things about my country. That was not possible. And Sigi was not describing precisely what was happening there. It was a general thing, you know, for all African countries. The problem of culture, it was not just about Côte d'Ivoire or about the precise situation taking place there. So, yes, being here has an impact on my writing, of course. Unless I write about America, what I wouldn't do because I don't believe I know America as the real American, and I like to write about what I know. Now that I begin going back home, seeing things for myself, I can go back to writing and write about Côte d'Ivoire. And maybe I can do it easily because I wouldn't have the impression that I am just imagining and saying stupid things about Côte d'Ivoire.
Dr. Koné, don't you, going back to the issue of writing in our indigenous languages, it would seem to me, and don't you think that if we use those languages as a language of instruction, it would sort of automatically make people write in their, so, you know, if for example, you were teaching a literary class and you taught it in Bambara,
Yeah.
it would make more sense for us people to write in Bambaran because Africans don't use their languages as languages of instruction. We study in English and French. That maybe is where the disconnect is.
Yeah. When I said writing in our languages, I understand teaching in our languages too. Everything. We should have the Bambara and all these African language, the Ani and Akan and everything taught in our schools, of course. I don't say, I know sometime when I say these things, my friend, the French, they are not very happy about it. The Francophonie, well, I am not against France, of course. And I believe that because of our history, we will have all the time French, and that is normal. So France will still be with us, and we will still practice French to look to other parts of the world. But it is, in my view, essential if we don't want to lose everything. Because in some countries like Mali, they are lucky because they have an old history, and their languages, I think, will survive. Bambara will survive, maybe Wolof. But in Côte d'Ivoire, we have very small languages, and they are not very solid yet. So in a century or two, all this language will disappear. And I think that will be something terrible. So keeping our languages, teaching them, writing in them, will help them survive, which doesn't mean that we abandon the French or English or Portuguese. No. And I think we will be more complete, we'll be richer, and we will bring more to the other people in the world. If we just speak French, I don't know, we can't bring more than the French are bringing. And the language, being connected to the culture, if we lose our languages, that means we will lose the culture too. So I don't know what we will be.
Well, I think we're through with our time here. So thanks so much to Dr. Koné, and thanks to Angel Batiste, and thanks to all of you for coming. I hope we see you at the next Conversations with African Poets and Writers event. Take care.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.